What is my price prediction for Cardano ADA this season? So if you want to know, I think this season is going to hit the highest point somewhere between March and November of 2025. And that basically means that Bitcoin tops out at some point within that margin there, within the next few months, I guess. And pretty quickly after that, I think many altcoins will see their highest points of the year. And I mean, highest point of the year will most likely also mean their highest point ever. And for Cardano, I'm pretty damn sure that we've not really seen the craziest of runs just quite yet. I mean, if we take a look at Cardano right now, it's sitting slightly below $1. There is, in my opinion, also still some probability we'll see some lower prices before higher. But if we're taking a look at things right now, we went the 2017 cycle, right? And we saw about $1.20, which was pretty cool at the time. I was making videos about Cardano at the time as well. If I remember correctly, there was all the hype of Cardano's mainnet launch. Wasn't it an Ethereum token before? Man, time flies. Some things I don't even remember correctly anymore, so maybe not. Anyway, quickly afterwards though, well, quickly is an understatement. A few years after, so the 2017 cycle went from 2 cents, let's call it, to roughly $1.20. Pretty damn crazy. Next cycle, it went from, let's say, 10 cents to roughly what? Let's quickly check it out. $3. So again, 10 cents to $3 that cycle. Right now, we started this one at 30 cents. So 3.5 times higher as a bottom than the previous time. I kind of feel as if, from that perspective, since here it did roughly, let's call it a 50x. It's actually a 60x, going from 2 cents to $1.20. So a 60x in that span. Here it went from 10 cents to, let's just call it, $3. So let's just call it a 30x or so. Here, right now at 34 cents, I think we have to end up at least a 15x from the bottom. The bottom was 35 cents. So we have to at least, in my opinion, end up at like $5, $6 or so to just make this chart look somewhat reliable. And I kind of believe that the pattern that was set here is going to be the same for Bitcoin, the same for Ethereum, the same for most coins. But there's a little detail why I think Cardano could actually go significantly higher this season. Let me just quickly show you. Well, if we take a look at Cardano's price relative to Bitcoin, one thing is becoming quite apparent. First of all, I'd say that we are due for yet another massive move, as recently here we've been converging, we've been consolidating, and we're waiting for some sort of move towards either direction. Now, in the short term, this is again a very near term, just about a day or so, it feels like we are going down, as Cardano has been going down, Bitcoin mostly sideways. And that's why this chart is downward sloping here for a little bit. Also, perhaps because it wants to come along with the pattern. But very soon here, potentially another, little teeny weeny bit down. I think we are due for another leg up. I actually just think that Cardano versus Bitcoin is going to break out towards the upside here. And relatively, this is not that big a move. Because again, we'd be up roughly 30% or so from current prices, which is nice, but relative, if we go take a look at the daily chart here, relative to some of the previous levels that were hit, okay, on this chart, we will not be able to see it. Let's quickly go to maybe Bitstamp. So does this one have more history? It also does not. Okay, so which one is going to have the longest? Here we go. It actually does. Just had to load in real quick. Here we go. So if we take a look at ADA versus Bitcoin on a longer term scale, even here, it's actually not a long one. All right, was able to find a longer term chart. Took a little bit, but here we go. If we're taking a look at Cardano ADA versus Bitcoin relatively, right? Let's go weekly chart. I think that would be best in this instance. If we go take a look at it relatively, there's still quite a crazy amount of room to grow. If we go back towards the 2021 run, for example, we'd be at a 6.5x from current prices, what we reached at that peak. So that basically means from current prices of what? About $1, let's call it. We'd basically be at $6.50 relative with Bitcoin still at these prices. That basically means if we take a look at August of 2021, and we take a look at the Bitcoin price, Bitcoin has relatively outperformed Cardano by a crazy margin. You would be basically down 84% on this pair. Or the opposite side, Bitcoin has gone for a massive run already. Cardano needs to play a little bit of catch up. And that again could be with roughly a 6 or so X on Cardano, maybe even a 7X, just to get back to Bitcoin relatively. Again, so if we take that into consideration, right now Bitcoin is at 95,000. To get back to the highest point for ADA, we'd be at a roughly, let's call it 6x from here, right? 530% increase, so 6.3x to get to the highest point ish. That would basically just mean $6.30, let's call it, per ADA. That is with Bitcoin at 95,000. If Bitcoin, in that sense, also does a 3x from current prices, going towards 300,000, obviously that would also mean, if Cardano relatively stays the same in terms of market dominance, relative to Bitcoin that is, that then also Cardano could go from $6.50 or whatever to $20 per coin, and it really wouldn't be that odd. Now, I don't want to be a person to say, you know what, we're going to go back to the old highs. Sometimes coins don't. Right? Sometimes they're overtaken by crazy margins. Coins like SUI have overtaken a lot. So it could go way higher. It could for sure. It could even go double because maybe relative to Ethereum, it's going to start overtaking some of that market cap. So it could even go all the way towards here. But if we want to be conservative, and I like to sometimes put the target a little bit lower just so we have like a baseline. If we put it at the January 2022 level, not even a high point, but just right here, that's roughly a 3.3x. So let's just say $3.50 if we were to go back to some of these old prices, right? $3.50. If we then also have ourselves a 3x because Bitcoin goes to 290,000 or so, it's again $10 per ADA. I just want to say that that is like my baseline. And $20 per coin, I'm going to say between $15 and $20 is where I kind of expect things to end up. And then on the higher end, again, it's just going to matter how much relatively is going to overtake from Ethereum and all those other coins, because at that point, we might be able to put the target way higher. For example, we might be able to put the target more towards the 10,000 Satoshi mark, for example. And at that point, it might actually be, for example, a 10x, so $10 per ADA. And then if Bitcoin also does a double or triple, we could actually end up with a $30 ADA relatively with that Bitcoin price. And I think this is something a lot of people are overlooking. A lot of people forget that it's not only about the dollar value per ADA, which is important. I get that, sure. But relatively to other coins also has, in my opinion, one of the most significant meanings, let's call it. Anyway, so if we take a look at, this chart is not old enough. Let's just quickly say it topped out. Nah, it's not old enough. Let's quickly go find it. The idea still counts. This is not the highest point, right? It hit like $1 or something like that. So let's just say here was the highest point for ADA first. Let's call it right there, right? That was the highest point for ADA at some point in the past. Then it hit that as a high point, roughly $3. I think right now, if we're talking about how this is going to look, I kind of believe that it's going to be looking more along the lines of a new high point. Pretty high relatively, but as a baseline, as I just said, like the lowest I'd ever accept is roughly 5x from these prices. And if you're trading on a platform like Bluefin, of which I've kept the link down below, you might actually get yourself an iPhone 16 right now, or iPhone 16 Pro, whatever. As right now, we're giving away 2 of them. So check out the link down below. Why not? That's where we're trading on right now. If we're trading on a platform like Bluefin, even going to $5 with some leverage could actually be a 50x, for example. That could be absolutely massive. But that's, again, the base target that I would put based on the dollar terms. That is, again, not looking at anything else, just the dollar terms, because at that point, we've gone to $3 in cycle 2, and then about, let's say 7, 8, something like that dollars in cycle 3. But relatively, I think this is way harder to estimate because you're not seeing the main driver of force. I mean, if we take a look at a Bitcoin chart right now, even, just for fun, and you remove all the drawings, if you don't look at it from a logarithmic perspective, but just flat out, it does look kind of stupid to see a Bitcoin price all the way up here, for example, $300,000 or so, because relatively going from $20,000 to $70,000 obviously is only a 50K move, but going from $70,000 to $300,000 is so much more. And that's why my target actually for Bitcoin is roughly 240K. Anyway, if you look at it from a logarithmic perspective, and specifically when you put in all the lines, it does not, for example, here, $250,000 for Bitcoin, look that weird at all. And that's why I said this number as $7. So on a flat dollar term, it looks really kind of crazy, but I kind of have it, I find it too low as a baseline. I kind of feel as if it will be hit for sure, but I never want to put guarantees out there. But if you start looking at it logarithmically, then you start seeing that, well, indeed, the only problem is we do not have the run 1 in here. But then if we start just looking at, for example, a $20 ADA level, again, it just looks like a pretty smooth chart. If I had to draw, oh, that's a little bit ugly. If I had to draw something in, it does look pretty smooth, like pretty logical in terms of a cyclical nature. And so again, if I had to put a target on the Cardano ADA price, I'd say maybe around the $15-20 mark, where I kind of see it going if the previous cycle is repeated, if Bitcoin actually sets through and goes towards the 200K plus regions. If it doesn't, maybe more towards the $7 to $12 per ADA is more realistic. As a baseline, I'm going to say that $7.50 per Cardano. My highest conviction is going to be $13 or so per ADA. Just again, to put it kind of on the low end, $9 to $13 I think is where I kind of expect it to go, with some of the higher echelons being 20 plus, depending on if Bitcoin actually goes towards those levels. But again, that was just my thoughts. Just want to give you guys some idea as to what I'm thinking with this coin. Of course, many things are happening every single day with the project that could also aid or hurt it, depending on, of course, what comes out. And of course, what the competition is doing, and of course, what Trump is doing and the SEC is doing might also help or destroy the coin's price action on the short term. But that's about it for right now. Like I just said, make sure you put that notification bell on so you never miss out on another crypto video. Whenever something crazy happens, I'll notify you guys with another update. And that's about it.